Sì, anche qua. Dunque le facciamo, qualche foto le facciamo, sì, sì, sì. Adesso? No. Sì. Bisogna vedere la libretta che basicamente le fa, no? La SDK, la CF, una cosa. Adesso vediamo se c'è.
But it's nice at the end. Yeah. No, it's nice at the end to have some recording.
Cazzo è andato? No, no.
E là mi ha detto se chi l'ha detto?
Taking.
No, il problema è che se stacco adesso una presa è un disastro. Su un secondo solo. Cazzo.
No, questo non staccare niente ovviamente, però cavolo.
Sì, servirebbe una presa.
Abbiamo bisogno di
solo che sono tutte.
Una,
Adesso non
va
posso
bene.
staccare.
Ah no, quindi neanche a dire una doppia spina che
No, ma non
stacchiamo.
posso staccare adesso.
Un'altra presa? Sempre da questa parte del muro? Perché
Io mi riuscivo
altrimenti lì c'è
Guarda, là c'è una ciabatta, no?
però non so di
Neanche se ti metti a.
se no sugli altri muri. Gli altri muri sotto le colonne
Sono dietro.
dietro.
qua c'è qualcosa.
Questo non so, io non. Ah, no.
Questo, posso mettermi qua?
Ce n'è una qua. Volevo dire una cosa.
Adesso appena parte, l'ho fatto ieri sera.
Guarda, c'è un puntatore, se lo tieni in mano, tira avanti in tre, lo fa lui, se non ci fa più. No, no, è già tutto lì. Guarda, dove c'è il wifi è destra, ti puoi logare con quello. C'è il conto alla rovescia di davanti, se vuoi guardare quello se sei pronto adesso lo sai. Dimmi tutto.
No?
Però
Sto registrando io adesso, vediamo se funziona.
Ah, ok, vabbè. Si è registrato con il gesto.
questo si fa durante il fine della attesa, che mi fa vedere se
Tutto bene?
Posso usare un microfono?
Noi abbiamo votato, adesso siamo preoccupati anche io.
Direttori che muoiono.
Io sono Salvatore che dice ci siamo sentiti via mail, allora per farci un quadro.
Good morning and welcome. Please take a seat. We are going to start in a few seconds. Thank you.
Io quando verrò in cercheremo di... Io ho detto che non posso impegnarmi a stare in classe, però...
Lucia, lei è Lucia, vero?
Sì, come va?
Grazie.
Ci siamo visti
Sì,
qualche
ci siamo
volta.
già visti, però non ero sicuro che fosse. E lei che si interfaccerà con Giulio della parte startup, vero?
Sì, esatto.
Ecco, perfetto. Magari si
Ci
faccia.
siamo conosciuti
Ieri. Allora si faccia raccontare bene a Giulio il prossimo bando, quando esce, insomma di essere ben aggiornata sul programma che
Perfetto, sì,
diceva
magari
giustamente Gagliano, che
Sì.
poi il prossimo bando anche voi potreste farlo circolare.
Assolutamente. No, adesso magari organizziamo un momento di... Good morning to everyone and welcome to the Open Care Final Conference. I'm Lucia Scopelliti, I work for the Municipality of Milan and I'm in charge for the Economic Planning Unit, and I'm glad to welcome and invite on the floor Mrs. Cristina Tajani, our Deputy Mayor for Urban Economy and Labor. Thank you, Cristina.
Thank you, Lucia. My name is Cristina Tajani. I'm the Deputy Mayor responsible for economic development, labor policies, commerce, human resources in the Comune di Milano. And I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to Milano for the final conference of Open Care project. Indeed, the conclusion of the Open Care project provides us with the opportunity to examine the results of experimental work carried out in differing realities of several European countries, local governments, universities, research centers, and players of economic and social innovation. Over the course of these 2 days, we look at the outcomes of 2 works' work that will remain, I wish, at the disposal of a wider community facing the same challenges. And now community care models are evolving with the aid of digital technologies. The theme of care is one of the most challenging and encouraging areas associated with the new urban economies, a perspective that binds economic productive aspects to social concerns, and setting the ambitious goal of generating innovation and enhancing the quality of urban life in an inclusive and sustainable way. Change in lifestyle have, in fact, created diverse and increasingly pronounced needs, particularly in an urban context where an old welfare system cannot always answer needs really. This conference, therefore, provides the opportunity for a broader recognition of the tools of social innovation. On this front, the City of Milano has been engaging with programs, projects, and actions aimed at supporting and experimenting open innovation in all its various thematic declarations, with particular attention at the development, employment, and social impact in an urban context. One of the most important actions taken by our cities in terms of new urban economies is the strategic plan called Manifattura Milano. I suppose Mr. Renato Galliano will talk about it later. Indeed, where we found ourselves now, the Milano Lewis Hub for makers and students, is a true sign of our commitment. This former logistics warehouse of around 1,000 square meters is being upgraded and transformed through a public-private partnership into a new space dedicated to training, enterprise development, and creative activities, and where the municipal administration has invested almost 550,000 euros. A last point, capacity can continue to strengthen and that our shared open innovation policies can continue to find adequate stimulus, support, and investment from European institutions. And finally, let me thank all those who have put a lot of work into organizing this conference and the events, in particular the staff of Comune di Milano, Mr. Galliano, Mrs. Copelliti, Mrs. Torri, and our strategic partner in the project WeMake. And I'm very pleased to wish you a successful conference and a pleasant stay in Milano. Thank you.
Thank you, Cristina, for your commitment. And also I would like to give the floor to Roberto Costantini, which is the second host of this event. He is director for this place, for the Milano Lewis Hub for Makers. Thank you, Mr. Costantini.
Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here. We're very happy to host you in this place. You probably know that this is the first event we hold here. So you are inaugurating the place in a certain way, and we are very proud to have the Open Care Final Conference set up over here. I think Mr. Ianni has already told you a bit about what this place is, but basically it's one of those successful ideas where public and private come together. We have, thanks to the Fondazione Giacomo Brodolini and Italia Camp and Lewis University, put together a team together with the Comune di Milano to set up this place. Many millions of euros have been invested in this place. The Comune has contributed for it. The uniqueness of this place, just for you to let you know, is not about the single parts, but about the parts put together. In here we have a Fab Lab, which we invite you to visit, of course, over here, where the people can come and experiment, and it's open to the citizens and to the small enterprises here in Milano. We have an area for management training. We have an area for Startup Accelerator, which will start in January, which is up there, which you can see is empty right now, but it will be fully crowded of people by the end of January. And finally, we have, and you can see that even today, if you wish to have a walk-up site later, an area for kids. We have all the 16 and 17-year-old kids of various high schools here in Milano that will be here every week. We'll have more than 1,000 students coming through the training over here. So the important thing is not the single pact. We have many fab labs or incubators for startups and these things, but rarely they come together in the same place. So we'll have from kids to managers over here in this area, and we're very pleased about that. Having said all this, I wish all of you a very good conference, and I hope you'll find the place interesting. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Costantini. So now you can figure why we choose this place for hosting this conference and why we strongly wanted in particular to talk about Manufacture 4.0 and care in here. So now we'll go directly to a presentation of what is Open Care, what represents for us, and especially from a city perspective. So I leave the floor to Mr. Renato Galliano, the Director of Urban Economy and Labor Department. Thank you, Renato.
Thank you to you, Lucia, and welcome to all of you, specifically to our international partners, to our officer, and she will talk after me. And I will give you an overview about the Open Care project, which has a very interesting subtitle, The Digital Social Innovation and the Future of Care in Milan. I mean, we are trying with this project to put together different aspects which are very, very successful and very interesting for the future. But let's start from, no, I have to, sorry. Okay. Here you have some pictures trying to summarize the most important challenges we have to face in Milan. But let's say that is not only a problem of a city of Milan. When we talk about the non-self-sufficient elderly people, when we talk about refugees or asylum seekers or women looking for a new job and so on, we are talking about some societal changes and challenges that all the cities in Europe and let's say in the Western countries are facing. So with the project, we tried to use different methods to face these challenges. The first, I would like to mention this approach, which is a collective intelligence approach, which is, and let me simplify, what we consider collective intelligence is a kind of step, a second step or step ahead toward a new approach, is the second step of the co-design approach, which is very well known in Italy and in Europe. But the collective intelligence means also looking outside of the small group of designers, collecting information from the market, from the community, reference community, and so on. So this is the first aspect, and I would like to underline that the concept of openness, scalable, and replicable of the project and the method. This capacity of collecting activities and thoughts, ideas, is the focal point for achieving new solutions. The second aspect is this, is the fourth industrial revolution, how it's called, the fourth industrial revolution, meaning Industry 4.0, meaning new urban activities and productive activities. As the Deputy Mayor Cristina Tajani has already mentioned before, the City of Milano was able, after a participatory process involving all the players working on this topic, I mean universities, association of entrepreneurs, SMEs, third sectors, and so on. After this participatory process, we were able to define a kind of guideline to help the city to reshore activities, productive activities within the urban activities, within the urban environment. Talking about production activities, we mean being in an urban area, sustainable activities with special focus on environment, energy, inclusion, and so on. This also means another aspect. New players are approaching the sector of the care. Fab Labs, maker spaces, and so on are not used to work within the sector of the care. We have tried with this project to put together different players coming from the sector, the traditional sector of care, and players coming from a completely different world, which is the maker space and the Fab Labs. We took the occasion to present the project under the Horizon 2020 program and specifically the CAPSI activity, and with partners, and these our partners, with the City of Milan, we have Ed Ryder from UK, the Institute for Economic and Business History Research, Sweden, the Schimpuls Foundation, Netherlands, the University of Bordeaux, France, and we make from Milan, from Italy, to design this project, which is based on these aspects. This aspect, the prototyping layer, the policy designing layer, the online conversation layer, and the technology for collective intelligence layer are the base, the pillars of our project. They are, all of them are connected in a kind of a circle, and after of being involved in this project for 2 years, we can say right now that putting together different players coming from different sectors, different cultures, with the different perspectives and so on, but all of them focused in finding new solution for the care system is very, very useful for the players, but also for the users, for the final user of these activities. And this is the base of our project. I won't go through all of them because we will discuss it during this afternoon and tomorrow, but I would like just to give you an overview, but sorry, I have to use my glasses. Just to give you a very short summary of the agenda of today and tomorrow. I will give the floor to Loretta Anania, which is the program officer from DG Communication. Then we will have some focus on collective intelligence and social innovation. After the coffee break, we will talk about the cities as platforms for open innovation. And after the final remarks, during the happy hour, you will have the possibility to visit the exhibition, which is in a room on my left, on your right. And tomorrow we will continue with a morning dedicated to the concept of new urban economies and digital manufacturing. First of all, we will discuss about the City of Milan vision on this topic, but also other experiences will be presented. And let's mention Made to Care, which is an emerging innovation ecosystem from the Polytechnic of Milan. Another session we will go through the from care services to care as an open system, so the open care perspective. And then after the coffee break, we will discuss tomorrow on the economies of the care and the innovation. I'd like to remember the exhibition, and tomorrow all the selected projects will be presented, but you have the possibility also to visit them also today. And before ending, I'd like to thank the team, the Open Cares team, and Lucia and Rossana, but also Matteo Matteini, which is there. And thank you for your effort. All of them have been involved since the beginning in a very, very deeply way, producing and providing energy, thoughts, and creativity in order to manage and to go through the entire project. Thank you. And right now, I will ask Ninetta.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Renato, for this overview, for the presentation of the 2 days. So I invite to the floor Mrs. Loretta Nania, that she's going to represent the European Commission. She's a program officer from the DG Connect. In fact, I would like to remind that Open Care is a project funded by the European Commission. And Loretta is going to tell us why the Commission decided to support a project like this, and also she's going to give some elements about a brand new project developed by the European Commission called Next Generation Internet.
Thank you. Okay. Hello everyone. So, mi chiamo Loretta Nania, sono italiana. Quante persone non capiscono l'italiano? How many do not understand Italian? 3. Okay, I could speak either language. So let me introduce myself first. So my mother was a Montessori teacher, so I finished school by 17 and entered university in the UK, because in Italy you had to be at least 6 to enter first grade and at least 18 to enter university. And I took exams as privatista, but those rules have changed. I also entered the UK with liras in my pockets. You couldn't export lira at the time. When I had to pay my fees, it was 3 times the UK students. I was a foreigner. So the reason I say that is now I see, perhaps with Brexit, that we're going to go back to a framework where you don't have the euro, you don't have a common currency, you don't have students going everywhere with Erasmus. Erasmus is one of our best projects because it allows students to travel and learn from each other. So my first slide, one other thing is I went to MIT, got a PhD there, and I was lucky to work on the internet, which at the time was a new project. I was in the DARPA, and I remember the very first IBM machines. When I joined the Commission, and I joined the Commission because I believe in research, and I believe in broadband networks. So I'm very happy when I read in Corriere della Sera that Enel is now investing in open fiber. Stockholm has invested also in dark fiber, and for about the first 10 years in the Commission, I was funding broadband applications and looking at cost benefit. Things don't change that fast. We are still looking at the cost benefit of broadband, but I'm a broadband enthusiast. I'm also an enthusiast about research. And in 27 years, I've funded a lot of projects. And currently, I have a lot of projects in Milan, because Milan has been very successful in leading the way in projects on smart cities. And in this case, I'm going to talk to you about social innovation. Social innovation and citizen engagement. These are the keys for the future, for the reform of healthcare and other digital welfare services. The European story since 1957 in Rome, the treaties, is unity and diversity. It's easier said than done. You all have to take your part and vote for these things, all of these good things. So sustainability is the one that the CAPS project, which was mentioned by the earlier speaker, that is a project where the Commission has invested 70 million worth of research. We currently have something like 54 projects. Open Care is one of them. All of these projects are doing what some national programs, such as the one in Portugal, does, which is to mix things such as Fab Labs, hackers, movements, open source, and NGOs, civil society. So the key word is that in my previous projects, before I worked on CAPS, I was doing a lot with SIP, with Orange Telecom, with IBM, but not with civil society organizations, which is a shame because my father, when he worked at FAO and United Nations, World Bank, he created COPAC. The A is for agriculture, the C is for capital, funding. So in the first question on your agenda, what do you need for open models? Well, cooperatives have always existed. They are not new. What is new is the technology that supports movements of people and also new institutions. So it's institution building that is really the focus of these programs, which start from research. Something about the EU in these days. The Nobel Prize, thanks to 70 years of lasting peace, which should not be taken for granted. There are indicators. You are researchers, so you know about indicators. So some of the most peaceful countries are part of the Union. So let's strengthen peace and strengthen unity and diversity. Then we go more into the distribution of resources, income, taxes. And it turns out Europe is home to the most equal societies in the world. This is the OECD. And now I get to my little Horizon 2020, which, as I said, I came to work on FP2. I had the very first memo project, digital audio broadcasting. These are technology-driven broadband applications. The first framework program was all about IT. This was Olivetti, Siemens, Bull. I could go through many, many industries in Europe completely disappeared. We now have a situation, platforms was what we were going to talk about, where I think there's like 2 companies that own something like 70 to 80% of the data in Europe. The situation is less monopolistic in the US. And so all of our projects are trying to build choices. They are small, they use open source hardware, and like Arduino, if you know, or Raspberry Pi. They all use open source software, which means that they don't own it. They put it under a private license, under an open source license for reuse. So the reuse and the constant innovation is part of the process that is now called digitalization. There's also AI, robotics, and other things. So Horizon 2020, our budget was approved for FP9, which is the one that follows Horizon 2020, was approved just 2 days ago. So I was happy. It looks like a big number. Then I looked at agriculture. It's 5 times as much as research. I read today that 30% of the public Italian researchers are precari. You cannot, I mean, we are also some of the oldest researchers in the world. So again, a plea for research budgets. It's very hard to get into CAPS. Open Care was one of them. For every project we funded, we had like 19 who didn't get funded. So although my budget, when I talk 70 million, seems huge, there's about 20 times as many little civil society organizations, fab labs, hackers forums that would like to change the world and would like to be given a chance. So some of you are very lucky. You know, you work hard. Whoops, what happened here? Electricity, it's energy, moving to broadband. So, CAPS has 40 projects, and they're all about, in fact, when I speak, if you have a smartphone, you can look at collective awareness, just 2 words. If you put it in a search engine, you will get all of the projects. Okay, collective awareness. And we had the last call, and I finished 2 negotiations. They're all going to start 1st of January. We have 10 more projects to add. So all of them are about sustainable development. It turns out that of the DG Connect budget, at the time, only 16% was devoted to sustainable development. That's too little. Sustainable development is actually one of the biggest. I'm enthusiastic about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I was hoping that all the CAPS projects would be able to use the same indicators because the main point to make is that those 17 goals are related. Let me give you an example. If in Africa you fund women, you will also reduce births and reduce poverty. So you cannot just do programs that ignore women. You know, you have to, and I can talk about water or air. They're all related. It's an ecosystem. So I think there's a lot of work that went into those 17 sustainable goals. The Commission is really doing a big part in the environmental area, for example. There are 2 areas we are less good at. One is poverty reduction, and the other one is number 5, is women's issues. So citizen engagement is what it's all about, okay? Citizen engagement through platforms. One of the projects that I had called WebCozy managed to get 1.5 million citizens involved on its platforms. This is nothing compared to 3.5 billion that plug into Facebook every day, but still, so our projects are small and fragmented. But some of them, and this was the one that reached the most people, some of them do actually get very strong local support. And it all starts from the local. Having the support of the Milan administration, and in fact having the Comune signing our contracts is astounding. For me, I mean, it's incredible. When I first started, it would take like 6 months to get any public museum, whatever, to even give you an answer on a contract. So our projects are really, the Americans say, on the ball. You really have to deliver quickly. So yes, citizen engagement, social innovation is now the buzzword. It fits in all of these DGs. We're going to have a big conference just in 2-3 days in Lisbon. Lisbon has a program, national program, that is just like CAPS. It has similar projects, started a few years ago. And all of my projects are together doing a session on digital welfare. How do you continue to support welfare at a time when we are shrinking resources? You actually need the digital platforms. And I just wanted to make sure that although the words are the same, the citizen, the user, the citizen is cast in different roles. As in the media, it's the audience. It's the creative artist, the consumer, curious, decision maker, funder, observer. Active and passive and everything in between. And on active and passive, as a European, I don't like to just consume. I don't like to consume media. I think we should also produce. Now, in terms of art, culture, music, there's nothing to be said. I mean, but with the digital, we need to also produce in that digital environment. This doesn't necessarily mean IPRs or limited. You can actually thrive in other ways, and these are the new economic models that some of the projects are doing. Now this is actually my future. This was the new, CAPS is finished. We had 3 or 4 calls. It's now being funded through other DGs now that we have prepared the technology and the organization. This is the new program. So next year I will be funding projects in this. So I'm actually going back to funding internet technology projects. Why the internet? Because of those ethical, political, privacy, and trust issues that I mentioned. I think Europe has to be producing as well as consuming. And the EU is there to support you. Things are not easy. The EU has to be seen now in a changing place, in an evolving world. So the economic weight is going down. Others are going up. There are defense priorities, the so-called Macron budget. There's the agriculture budget, I mean, I mentioned it before, and there's my research budget. But for this project on open care, the most important thing has to do with population shift. Okay, and also the recomposition of families, the changing. So collectively, we have to be aware of how profoundly changed is our economy and society. We come out of a crisis. The demographic problem is astounding. With an aging society and youth not working because there are no jobs, there can be no welfare like we had it after the war. So we have to be creative. There's also national borders and security. And there's a questioning of trust and legitimacy. When people do not vote, when more than half, when there's the party of non-voters is bigger than the party of voters, you have problems of democratic legitimacy, hence citizen engagement. The way ahead, I'm finished now. These are just my own calendars. As I mentioned, we will have the next calls on those topics to reinforce the internet. The last calls of CAPS have been done, so we are now going to start seeing the results. In this moment, we have at least 54 trials covering all sorts of areas, and you will find out more about open care. And yes, finally, new elections. Everything changes. That's it. There's a lot of, this is our new website. And actually, if I can take questions, perhaps at some other time or later, I'd be very happy. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Loretta. If you all agree, we could postpone questions because we are running short of time. So I would like to introduce the first roundtable of this afternoon. It will be moderated by Fabio Sgaralli, who is head of innovation for Fondazione Giacomo Brodolini. Unfortunately, we had a slightly change in the program because Francesca Bria was unable to attend. And so we are directly going to talk about from collective intelligence to social innovation, a big challenge for all of us. Thank you, Fabio.
Thank you very much, Lucia. I think you can take a little rest now. I will take it over from here. Can I have the speakers here with me, please? Paulienne, Olivier. Thanks. Winnie, Anthony, and Alberto. Please, I'm going to introduce you in a minute. I just want to set the scene a little bit for this session. And when the municipality of Milan kindly invited me to moderate this session and shared with me the agenda of these 2 days, I thought, wow, we really live in interesting times. As a municipality, collaborating with the Fab Lab on a project dealing with collective intelligence, social innovation, digital manufacturing, and the future of healthcare, I thought that the combination of those topics all together are actually a representation of the times that we are actually living today. And it is a transition, a passage that we are actually going through, a passage between an old model of doing things to a new model of doing things. Whilst the old model of doing things is showing limits, is showing some challenges, showing that inequality is rising, the poverty is rising, that there is a gap between demand and offer for all kinds of services, that inclusion is becoming difficult, increasingly so in many different parts of Europe, and so on and so forth. And the old model is actually transitioning into something new which doesn't have a definitive form yet, because that's what innovation is about. That's what social innovation is about. It's a process of evolving a system between a way of doing things into a different way of doing things. And the form that it's taking is being shaped by principles such as openness, inclusion, such as enabling technologies that are allowing us to perform magic in many different kinds of fields. And not just talking about economic fields, but I'm talking about social fields as well. And I think this transition is one of those moments in which, as a collective, we need to come together and reflect upon the change that we are experiencing and reflect upon the experiences that we're actually living and the experiments that we're conducting, and see whether there is something there that can help us to shape the future together. Because that's the real sense of what social innovation is about. There are many definitions out there. There is also an official definition by the European Commission of Social Innovation. One of my best definitions of social innovation is actually came from a 16-year-old in a classroom that said, you know, it seems to me that social innovation is really a bit like stupidity. Nobody knows how to define it, but we see a lot of examples around. And, you know, that's the sense that I'd like to represent here in this session, that there are many examples, that there are many experiments, that there are many different projects, and that we can try collectively to make sense of those projects and experiments, and try to see whether there is a future model emerging. Now, that was my little bit of introduction to the session, so I apologize to the speakers for stealing some time to the interesting conversation we're going to have. Let me just introduce who they are. We have Alberto Cottica from Edge Riders, who is also a partner of the Open Care project. We have Pauline Melis from the WAC Society. We have Olivier de Frenois. Apologies for my French, Olivier. And then we have Winnie Poucelet, is that correct? And Anthony Di Franco from the Open Insulin project. So I've asked our speakers not to have slides, because as it is a collective conversation, we decided together with the municipality that we didn't want to have too many slides, but we wanted to have a conversation and an exchange and a share of experiences, which I hope you will join in as we move on. But I've also asked them to take 3 minutes to just introduce who they are and what they do and why they're here. So we start in order with Alberto, please.
Hello everyone, I'm Alberto from a small mutant research and consulting company called Edge Riders, based in Estonia legally and in Brussels actually. We do collective intelligence stuff. This is our thing, and we do it like that. So this is actually a product of Open Care. It's something called the Semantic Social Network, and it's a way that you can aggregate large conversations using ethnography and network science. I could talk a lot about this, but I won't, and just probably move on. Let me just say that, since this is probably less than 3 minutes, what you're looking at there is about 1 million words in a conversation with several hundreds of people participating, and that's been filtered in a quantitatively accountable way. So what that does is it creates a sort of hybrid quantitative-qualitative research method that we think is an improvement over existing methods, because open conversations, such as the one we've been having on OpenCare in the last 2 years, are serendipitous. They can answer questions that had not been asked. They can zero in on what the community thinks is important, even though researchers did not think to even ask that question because it was not there. Picture a dinosaur 60 million years ago and being polled about what's important for dinosaurs. They would probably mention scarcity of game, whatever. They could not mention the asteroid that was going to go make them all extinct, and it was coming towards Earth. Now, if one of these dinosaurs had a telescope, he would have had that information, but the information could not have been getting out, because no pollster asks about very unlikely or novel or surprising outcomes. So hence, this is what we do, and this is what we did in OpenCare.
Great, thank you, Alberto. I've actually asked them to not to bring slides, but to bring one picture of what they do to show what they introduce themselves. So if we can go to the next slide and to Pauline, please.
I work at Vaak Society. We're an institute for art, science and technology, and we address societal challenges through creative research in multidisciplinary ways. So the crossover between arts, science and technology and engineers is key for us. We develop open solutions, we prototype, but we also try to open up closed systems. So we try to democratize technology and also influence society in that matter. And I wanted to show you this picture, or actually it's two, and it's one of the projects that Loretta mentioned is in the last CAPS call. It's made for you, and we are very happy that we've been granted and given this opportunity to work on it. And our idea is to enable citizens and healthcare professionals to co-design and deliver personalized healthcare solutions. So what you see here on the left, it's a design made by engineers and designers from OpenDot, together with specialists of Together to Go, and we'll be joining tomorrow as well. And they created a personalized bicycle for Lorenzo, and it's a digital fabricated one. And what we did, and I think that's the power of having those specialists located here in Milan, with the digital technology and just sharing the blueprints, I was able to, and you see it on the right, reproduce and replicate the same bike and put it on display during the Dutch Design Week. So our ambition is to really have the local initiatives brought to a broader level, share the notions that are behind it. So really push the collaboration and sharing of the ideas, so that people in other locations throughout Europe, maybe throughout the world, be able to benefit from those ideas. I think
that's a great first introduction. Thanks, sir. Olivier, your turn.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So I'm Olivier, co-founder of the Ecopen project. We're based in, the project is based mainly in Paris, France. And we're also based in our community, because Ecopen is both a community and a project. A community of very inclusive, a community of students, professionals, senior professional, young professional, researchers, designers, engineers, technicians, medical doctors, all around the world. And all together, we try to develop the project, which is designing. We share the same vision of designing an open source and low-cost stethoscope, which means that we want to provide healthcare professionals around the world a new tool, very affordable, as cheap as possible, to be able, during the clinical examination, to explore and see what's inside a patient's body. Today, medical doctors, they ask questions. They use their stethoscope. They try to understand what's going on, what's wrong with the patient, what's the pathology. And then they ask for complementary examination, such as medical imaging. But what if we could bring medical imaging inside the clinical examination for better, faster, and more efficient diagnosis? So that's the idea of ECOPEN project. So after 2 years of development, we now have a medical quality image laboratory prototype that we developed with the effort of the whole community and the support of our sponsor and partners. And now we're on the way to industrialize it. All we developed are under open license, so it can be reused, develop, improve, fork, as we said most of the time, to develop new application, new use. But for us, for the non-profit organization at the heart of the project, our aim is having an industrialized product. So we're on the way to the industrialization, and so it's a great challenge because we have to face regulatory matters, we have to face industrial processes, and but thanks to new partners, new industrial partners, new people in the community to support this new effort, which is our new milestone. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Olivier. Winnie, Anthony, who wants to go first?
Yes, thank you. So yes, I'm Anthony with the Open Insulin Project. There are two main components to that. One is just the technical work of making insulin, and another is the economic and legal organization of it. So I'll leave that to Winnie, and I'll describe a bit of the technical work that we're doing. So we're engineering a strain of yeast right now that is going to make and secrete insulin in about the simplest way that we think is feasible using current technology, and from there we're looking forward to automating the production process as much as possible and establishing a base of technology that can be used to manufacture insulin at a much smaller scale than is currently manufactured. Currently there are only 3 major manufacturers in the West, and there are many indications that they hold an oligopoly position in the market. Recently there have been several lawsuits that have begun to pursue this against them. But what we're working on is the technology to enable production at the scale of a city or a region, so that there can be much more competition in the market, and prices could potentially come down to the level of generic medicine. Right now, the profit margins in the market are absurd, perhaps above 1,000%. So this is our project for the next year, is to begin to implement this technology. And I'll turn it over to Winnie for some of the organizational steps that we're taking.
Hi everyone, my name is Winnie. So I joined the Insulin Project, Open Insulin Project, earlier this year, and I mainly took up the task of organizing the collaboration locally, because we had this vision of multiple labs all over the world working on this protocol. At the time when I joined, we were working on it with San Francisco or Oakland, where Anthony's based, Sydney, and then Ghent, Belgium, where I'm based. And now another project is starting in Cameroon. And we're talking with people in Central America, also with Matteo in Senegal, and other countries as well are in the making. And mainly we've collaborated on this through digital platforms, which enabled us really to share information much more easier over time zones and geographically. We've used the EdgeRiders platform for that for a bit, but we have several platforms we're working on. And now we are also thinking, what will we do when we have the protocol? Because this would be pretty fundamental to everything pharma related if we have an open source production protocol. And we're looking into starting a patient cooperative to govern this protocol, so that the power to decide what happens with the means that go into production of insulin and also the gains from the production, they can actually allocate where they see fit, if it is a cure, cheaper prices, or whatever they decide is in their best benefit. And yeah, we're looking into that in the next months, years, we don't know. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So let's start our conversation. I think the experiences we have here contain already a lot of the seeds of what we are trying to observe and discuss in the next 2 days. You know, keywords like contamination, serendipity, collaboration, openness, bottom-up, those are all elements of an equation, right? But the objective of this conversation is actually to try and explore how digital technologies can help social innovation. Also passing through collective intelligence, yeah, but not just collective intelligence. So I just want to hear your point of view on this. Doesn't matter the order, who wants to go first can go first. Just 2 questions, 2 requests. One is to be short in your answers, and the second one is to speak up, because don't trust that the mic will do all the work for you. Okay? Great. Who wants to start? Why don't you?
Me. Go. Okay. In 2007, a group of researchers from the Santa Fe Institute found what they call a scaling law in cities. They found out that certain activities are growing faster than the city size. For example, if every time you add an order of magnitude to the number of inhabitants of a settlement, salaries go up 30%. So if you want to have a 30% increase in your wage, Milan has 1 million inhabitants, go live in a city of 10 million inhabitants, and you will do the same job as you do, will be much better paid. Why is that? Well, it's because there's network effects related to the spillover of information. Where settlements are dense, information, the right information reaches you, and innovation explodes. When you talk about digital social innovation, Fabio, it gives me pause, because maybe this will be unpopular in this, in this particular room, but I don't think we should use that term anymore. We don't talk about electric social innovation, because we just take for granted that people have electricity and they use it to produce innovation. We don't talk about drinking water-powered social innovation, because we take it for granted that people have drinking water, and that enables some innovation activity. You don't have to look for drinking water, you have it, you can innovate, right? And digital is kind of the same. Now, probably the main result of the large open care conversation that I showed you, 350 participants, 5,000 contributions, 1 million words, is when communities try to innovate around care, they don't reach for technology, they reach for other people. However, certain technologies are very good at connecting people. So that generates a demand for technological solutions that are connective. Sorry, I should speak up. Connective in essence. The communities in open care adopt technologies that connect them with other people, right? In open insulin, we've seen that it has been a privilege to witness how Anthony's story shared in the at open care conversation that was taken up by Winnie, say, hey, actually, we want to help. You guys are in California, we are in Belgium, but guess what? We can still work together. Why? Well, voice over IP, wikis, mailing lists, simple stuff. But without that, it wouldn't happen. And fast forward to October, another guy from Cameroon says, actually, I want to help too. And again, same thing. You know, they can just latch on to each other very, very naturally, because these technologies are there. So yes, it is digital. Yes, it is enabling. However, it is infrastructural, pretty simple stuff. You don't need to write a lot of code. At the end of the day, you're looking at mailing lists. And everything else, this is the main result of the OpenCare, let's say, quest. Everything else is really collaboration protocols. Openness is more important than access to digital. Or rather, access to digital is now sort of generalized. But what is not generalized is that people can collaborate effectively, they're not jealous of IP, and that made Open Insulin such success in collaboration terms.
But that was interesting, Alberto, what you said at the beginning, no? About the density and frequency of the connections increase the speed and probability of innovation. So in larger communities or larger cities, there is a tenfold increase of the possibility to innovate or to speed up the innovation process. I thought that was an interesting concept and notion. In fact, cities today are seen as the places in which social innovation has the most chances to happen, and that's not by chance, by the way. The other interesting notion of taking digital out of this digital social innovation formula reminds me of another conversation I had in another conference in which we were actually discussing about taking the social innovation out of the social innovation equation. Because the more you talk about social innovation, the more it risks to become an empty slogan. So, for the sake of this conversation, we take digital and social innovation out, we'll just call it Is that all right? Pauline, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I think the digital is also to inspire people and to share knowledge and share insights, because beforehand it was only you teaching me in small learning communities, but now you have the possibility to really share it with all over the world. So I think and people are also capable of finding solutions and get inspired. So I think that's a big promise with the whole infrastructure that is at our disposal at this moment.
So we're also talking about the possibility to replicate fast what has been tested or experimented somewhere.
Yes, and some things that I've experienced can be beneficial for your experiments as well. So it's not only here with the new Fab Lab, getting the experiments going there, but also be able to tap into some things that are happening in Amsterdam or elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, sometimes we don't have all the time to reinvent the wheel. We can build on each other's innovations.
Yes, please.
Olivier?
So I definitely agree with what you just said. And from our experience, we could also add the idea of being inclusive. Because if you try to address a specific issue, like a medical problem, if you can include patients, medical doctors, healthcare professionals, engineers, researchers, like as most people as you can, you will have a better understanding of the problem. And if you can have a better understanding of the problem, it will be easier to find a solution. And on the other side, when we are living today some very busy life with family, with work, with many activities, with surfing on the internet, when you try to collaborate, it's never at the same time and never at the same place. So there is no time and space and place unicity. So digital can bring also solutions to unify time and space and letting people working all together. Even if it's not at the same time, the information will be stored somewhere and everyone can have the information later because of the jet lag of the different time zone. And so it's a very empowering tool, inclusive and also addressing this unicity problem. And then this creates also a common ground. What we call a common ground, it's when you collaborate with people, usually it's focused on work and tasks you have to do with them. But sometimes you work with people with different culture, with different language. So taking the time to know each other, to share experience, to share ideas, will lead to a better way of working together. And when you have some online tools to discuss, like some random channel in any IRC or any tools online that can let anyone know each other better, you will provide a better quality of work. So this is really important to empower people with digital in an innovative way, because innovation will be the sum of the expertise, of the experience of everyone. So sharing is very important. It's what you said, sharing and spreading information, because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Somewhere, someone did something that is probably under open license, so why don't we build on that as we need it? So this is really, I think, important using the digital.
Yeah.
How did you manage to get all the different stakeholders involved? Because doctors, patients, they're not necessarily on the same channels. So I was wondering, how did you bring them all together?
I maybe have two answers. First, in the medical area, in the medical sector, we realized that there is a lack of trust. Doctors and pharmaceutical companies sometimes they don't really trust each other, but they have to work together. Patients and patient organization and doctors sometimes they don't really trust each other. And we realized that openness is an excellent way, by transparency, to bring more trust. And when you build trust in a community of different people, you allow people to work together in a better way. So it's smooth and it's more efficient. So that's probably the first part of the answer. The second part of the answer is time. We need time to understand the concept. We're building an eco-stethoscope. This is something absolutely new, and it's a medical project. At the beginning, it's a medical concept, and it's very complicated to explain that to anyone. So we need time to explain what does it mean, because it's using sonogram during clinical examination. But when you discuss with experts, like medical doctors, radiologists, for example, we can have like 4-hour conversation on that concept. So it's very important to find a common language, a common cultures, and openness is also a way to bring, because what you just said, you have a wiki with documentation, so we define this word this way, we define this word this way, and if the people who are interested in participating take enough time to read and understand the documentation that must be as short as possible, we create something like a common. So the idea of common is exactly at the heart of this collaboration, of this way of collaboration, for me.
The notion of commons is actually fascinating, and you said a couple of things that particularly struck me. One is this idea that digital or enabling technologies provide the platform that equalizes access to information, so democratizes access to information. The question I have in response to that is that does it equalize competence as well? Like, can we rely on this horizontal way when it comes to health and care? Or, do we still need doctors? Question mark. And the second point that I found really interesting was this idea that by having different people coming together and sharing information and sharing competences, there is an increase of chances to actually coming up with something new, because actually bring different competences together and contaminate them. But overall, does social innovation belong just to the digital world? Like, is that the place for social innovation, or does it also have to happen in the real world? I don't know, Anthony, Winnie, what do you think?
Yeah, well, our answer is clearly no, because we're in biotech, and that's a very physical thing, and that also kind of puts on its head many of the things that have been said here, like the trust issue and openness. Like, we in Belgium have been experiencing some distrust because of openness, because people ask questions like, well, should biomedicine stuff be open? Because then people can just start injecting like insulin if they want. Of course, we always get this remark, and then we say, well, we are just doing a scientific research. This is not meant for injecting, just like you wouldn't inject dirt from outside here. It's not meant for it. Like, that's not what we're trying to do. But when it gets physical and when it gets biology, when it's about our own bodies, things get different. And this is important because the digital thing is very good at shuffling information around and like making things more efficient, or here and there making things a bit different as well. But when it's really about physical things, and you're not going to treat your diabetes with an app. you're going to need the physical medicine to treat you. And then if that's not open, well, then you're just, with your digital, you're just shuffling information around about privatized medicine. So what we try to do is really go the extra step and tackle this very complex thing of actual production of life necessary things. And we are trying to show that it's possible, mainly at this point.
Oh yeah, so that and a number of other things are I think interesting. I want to agree that the digital element should be viewed as something that's just a kind of infrastructural change. Even if you're taking it for granted day by day, it does have a lot of really interesting implications for the kind of work that we're doing. It really is what enables bringing production down to a scale where you can imagine things like more transparent collaborations among, across elements that constitute different interest groups right now, like pharmaceutical companies and doctors and patients. Right now, they all exist and operate at different scales. They're often organized at a national or global scale in some sense, and they end up having their primary loyalties being to the other members of their own class in that situation. And I think with these digital collaboration tools, we can see things reorganize and become woven into these like city-scale networks that we have evidence that these are the most productive and innovative ones. And then through that, I think we can break down these barriers of different classes with different loyalties who don't necessarily want to trust each other, and that people can have their primary loyalty be to their community networks, and then they'll see the incentives to act in the best interests of all the different stakeholders that are part of that community that way. So that, and then in turn, I think we get to an idea of like what the commons is going to look like and how it's going to be organized around this.
That's great, thanks. You want to add something?
Yes, I think also having local groups coming physically together is essential. Also, if you look at getting all the stakeholders together and create a common understanding, you need to see each other in the eye and be able to discuss and have the time for each other. So I think it's both. Have the digital layer where you can find the information, but also have it locally, and also have a chance of people introduced to a new topic. Because, for instance, healthcare professionals, they do have a lot of ideas of things that could be different, but they don't understand how. So if they are just taking little steps, meeting people in the Fab Lab, see what the potential could be, then that also enables them to overcome their threshold and the boundaries and start creating themselves. So I think it's very strong to have them both.
Great, thanks. Alberto.
Just to follow up on what we all have been saying, on a high-level view, I find that Europe kind of struggles with this, because where we are going is that the stakeholder model breaks down. Who are the stakeholders in a digital world? People who say they are. Anybody can participate. It's not just access to information that is democratized. It is power in a way. Because even though you may not wield a lot of power yourself, if you make a powerful argument in a truth-oriented discussion, which is open, people will start reacting and will start talking about what you said. And now you are owning the conversation, and you may be a nobody. So here's a little story. With some people from the Open Care project, we were in Denmark last week. And in a city called Aalborg, they did a consultation about the redesign of their school system, local school system. They did it on Facebook. And there is in the University of Aalborg a department of digital ethnography, so they could help. They used an approach not so different from our own, by the way, we discovered. But what happened there is that the trade union of the teachers found themselves wrong-footed because they were used to owning that kind of conversation. And now suddenly everybody could come. So what they did was they mobilized a lot of people to put a lot of likes to the posts of the trade union people. But then it turned out that likes didn't matter. There was not an election, it was a conversation. And people with interesting content were able to be much more influential than people with, let's say, credentials, so to speak. And so what happens is that the power dynamic shifts. The power dynamics with open now becomes tilted towards people that bring in competence, like you said initially. This is not what the stakeholder model is. The stakeholder model is, we make a list of the people who have interests, and these are the people who make the decision. It is completely different. And Europe's political culture is not particularly leaning in this direction.
Yeah, this relationship between power, influence, competence, access to information, it actually becomes more symmetrical than asymmetrical in a digital world and in social innovation, if I understand what you're trying to say.
No, there is no symmetry ever. No, this is kind of a complex system, but it is a new level. So you still have people who dominate the conversation. It's very clear in open care, but it's not the people that you would expect to. And in fact, when I use the word serendipity, is sometimes it's the people that you didn't know they existed before you started with that exercise. Openness is what allows people to self-select to be a part of what you're trying to do. But that doesn't mean that it's equal. It's open. Open is not equal. In fact, open systems, in our experience, give rise to extremely skewed dynamics. Power laws, right, with few people, 10% of the people being responsible for 90% of the content, or something like that.
And just a last comment on this discussion, and then I'd like to move to the next step in the conversation, is that innovation usually happens most in conversations in which everybody steps back from their particular point of view or interest in what is to be innovated. Because otherwise, the risk is not to have the chance to go beyond what is already there to find something new, if I make myself clear. So, this notion of, in a conversation, stepping back and allowing other people to jump into the conversation and bring in their competence and not necessarily their power is actually what creates an environment that can favor the emergence of innovation. So let's make one step forward and zoom a little bit in the healthcare and care sector. And when it comes, to digital and social innovation and care and healthcare, which is, the main focus of this project, Open Care, what are, in your opinion, or from your experiences, some of the critical factors that one needs to take into account? Is it about IPRs? Is it about, access to technology? Is it about, being able to use technology? Is it about privacy issues? What is it about? What are some of the critical factors to take into account?
One of the most critical facts might be the regulatory environment. Today, when you want to have a CE mark on a medical device you're developing, you cannot use the agile method. It's not compliant with the process. So for example, so we can't find ways to succeed, but it's important to have regulation, because we cannot provide doctors with a tool that they will never understand how it works. But first, when it's an open project, any medical doctors that will be an end user, or a patient will be an end user of the solution, can have access to all the process for the development, all the information, all the algorithm, all the technical aspect. But none of all those people understand technology, so that's normal. We have a regulation, and we prevent those device solutions to be dangerous, for example. So it's normal, but it can be improved to be more adaptive to startups, open source projects, and so on, because today it's more adapted to big companies with really clear processes. Many startups today develop open source connected devices or only non-open source connected devices, but they are developing solutions. And most of the startups I know, they switch from trying to be a medical device to wellness device. So it means it's a wellness device, so we don't have to have a CE mark like the medical device CE mark. So it's easier, so we can do a clinical test and we can have data because we cannot access the data to test our technology. So all of this is something we should address to have a faster and more relevant, more interesting innovation. And sharing data and sharing insights. So this is probably one of the aspects. Another one, just shortly, is how we can develop new models, because we are creating new value. Not only a financial or economical value, but also a medical value, a social value. Social value by the solution that those communities provide, but also social value for the contributor of a community. Because when we ask people from our community, for example, why are you here? What is your motivation? What is your incentive? Some said, I like to learn. I'm doing this kind of technology in transportation industry, but I'm interested in the healthcare industry. I want to play because it's fun for me. I want to experiment. I want to meet people. I'm bored during the weekend. So incentives are very, very large. So it's also a way for people to be more active citizens in the society, because when we are providing open source solutions, it will benefit everyone within the society. So that's probably the two aspects. So the value chain, and all the environment of sharing data, environmental and regulatory matters.
Yeah, but not forgetting that, health is a highly regulated.
That's normal.
And so, yeah, and I think that's normal and that's just. So, the trick is, how do you create open environments for innovation in a highly regulated environment? It's always a difficult balance to strike. But thanks for that. Pauline?
I think also liability is an aspect to take into account. And what happens if you create the open insulin and I start to make it and something goes wrong? What happens? Are you liable in law? So I think these are steps that need to be researched as well. What happens? Can we come up with a different or an alternative of a common understanding between us that is also that citizens are well informed, that they also know what they are stepping into or taking into account, and that because otherwise if you plan on having the CE, the certification, then it will take you quite some time to be on the market. So I think we need to look for different models, and also, addressing how you operate among each other.
Please.
Yeah, that's very much my sense of what's urgent as well, is that, well, even if we set aside all the transformations that are happening with more transparent ways of collaborating, making transparency the default, and letting us envision a situation where you have the relevant information available to you, and it's just a matter of interpreting that correctly and making your decisions based on it, and you don't have to go across these impenetrable barriers around institutional knowledge to get at what you need to make a well-informed healthcare decision for yourself. Anyway, there were shortcomings to the ways the incumbent institutions were making decisions on behalf of the patients before. the pace of innovation, I think, was a lot, and remains a lot slower within an institutional framework than it could be. This has been one of my frustrations as someone who has diabetes, is that very little is happening, and there's a lot of very interesting academic research that doesn't make it to market. So I think the regulatory environment needs to adapt to deliver on some of those promises and to clear away the barriers that exist in the way of those kinds of innovations, so that the actual best interests of the patients can be served.
Because I think it's very intriguing. You mentioned it also that are we getting rid of the doctors? I would say no, because they have the expertise, or the medical scientists have the expertise. But you, as a patient, also have a huge amount of expertise, and I think putting the expertise of each group involved in the healthcare system, if it's a health professional, a doctor, or a nurse, together with patients, that could really combine and really have the angles on the topic and really push the innovation where it might not happen if it's only specialists or if it's only patients.
Yeah, certainly. Like the theme we mentioned before, like right now they constitute their own groups with their own interests and loyalties, mainly within the group. Pharmaceutical companies want me to take an expensive drug all the time because that's how they make the most money. If I were sitting together with them and together with the doctor, we would, and we all had our input, we would come up with something very different as like the ideal way to deal with diabetes.
Can I just throw another consideration into this conversation about critical factors? Because one might imagine that in the healthcare sector, scale counts, like, big companies, large multinationals, big research centers, large amount of resources to invest in innovation. And, how does that clash or not with this notion of bottom-up, small-scale, social innovation kind of process? Is it an alternative to it? Do we need to include them? By them, I mean the big guys, or do we need to exclude them?
I can just quickly say, I don't think that bigger is necessarily better, and you already see that a lot of the pathologies come from these organizations being too big, and they're disconnected from the reality of whatever the problem is that they're supposed to be solving. So there's maybe a right scale or a right combination of scales, but there isn't just an economy of scale. There are diseconomies of scale as well that apply.
Again, not my opinion, but relating from the open care conversation, it doesn't really matter because 90% of the initiatives we collected are preventative health, not treatment, preventative. So that doesn't need big labs, and it doesn't need, 200 PhDs doing synthesizing molecules. It requires people doing yoga together. It requires lifestyle change. It requires going running, and this is, if you look at the statistics about impact, it turns out that this kind of care has a way bigger impact than acute treatment dollar, right, or euro in our case. So in fact, arguably there are diseconomies of scale. If you try to make the whole world or the whole nation go out and do Tai Chi at 7 in the morning in the town square, that's kind of an inefficient way to have people exercise more. What you want to do is you want to have many local groups that will get together and do whatever it is that gets them active, right? So again, in Europe, we have this tendency to look at innovation in terms of big iron, large hardware, scale intensive. And there are, indeed, areas in which this is the innovation you need, utilities, whatever. But I would claim that care is not one of them.
By the way, everybody, Tai Chi after break in this room. sir, please.
And I think this decentralized approach to care is kind of a blueprint for other things. For example, for research, what we are doing with Open Insulin. When I joined, I had this vision of several small labs all over the world hosting people who develop this open source protocol in their free time, which is basically zero cost. And actually, the original group of Open Insulin has been going on a very small crowdfunding for several years now. I think it was like $16,000, and they're doing like cutting-edge biotech research with it. And they've only spent a third of it. So, and this kind of disproves this idea of the big pharma saying, yeah, but expensive research needs us to blah, 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 profits. It doesn't make sense anymore in this decentralized way of working, and you're not trying to scale indefinitely and keep being more efficient. You get to a point where it's just different. It's not, more efficient doesn't matter anymore.
I also think that the power of citizens adding to the research could really push treatments in that way. And if you look at, for instance, a designer like Frank Kolkman, who has designed for flies, he came up with a kit for people with rare diseases to do genetic research. It's just a different approach to be able to create the data and add to the research. So I think the citizen power is one, and that's a scale. It's a huge scale.
Okay, we have 10 minutes, so if you have any comments or questions from the audience, this is the time. I'll do it.
Hello, my name is Rune Thorsen. I come from the Fondazione Donjocchi Rehabilitation Institute. When I joined the conversations in Open Care, one of the things that we were looking for was exactly the problem of legal issues. And the conversations in Open Care shows what I've been also experiencing in real life and any other conversation I've had so far on any open innovation, is that legal issues is a black hole. Once you get into it, you never get out. Once your discussions about your idea arrives at the legal issues, it stops there. And I hope that that is one of the things that will be provoked by the Open Care, that we can sort of find an escape route to get around the legal issues.
Thanks. There was a comment, right? Not necessarily a question, but that's fine. Any other comments or questions? Please, Renato.
Quite clear that innovation rely also in small groups, not in big companies, big labs, and so on. But what about the copyright and the right to copy? Good.
Well, we have, in Open Care, almost by definition, the vast majority of people subscribe to this idea of open. So the copyright is property of whoever came up with that thing, but it is also licensed with an open license, which means that people can take it, copy it, distribute it, modify it, improve upon it, etc. And this kind of kills so many problems. It's really incredible, the quantum leap in efficiency when you get rid of IPR, and intellectual property rights. And this is particularly strong in medicine because it's so heavy. Probably like a dose of insulin is 95% IPR in price, no?
Yeah, that's a complex story, and actually it passed from IP to complex interactions of like marketing and other ways of maintaining what is essentially an oligopoly. But like, I think there's, IP is one way to maintain a certain kind of economic power. There are other ways as well. But our experience has definitely been that for collaborating, just being an open source project was enabled a lot of these efficiencies that would be unthinkable otherwise. And then of course, when we're talking about how to approach the unfair influence that the incumbent institutions wield, certainly a lot of them use IP. A lot of them use other tactics. Pharmaceuticals is especially complex, and especially even more complex in the US because it's a very particular set of like incestuous relationships between regulators and industry insiders and stuff. And then it becomes a more complex question to address, but it's still, I think there's this essential idea that, like breaking down these barriers is really key.
Olivier. Just to comment on the copyright, because I want to jump on the patent, the question of the patents, because when we're drawing material, for example, you can have patents. For us, we believe that innovation, especially in open innovation, innovation in open source communities, we believe that innovation happen in the community, and the asset, the most valuable asset is the community and the methodology of how to animate this community to ask the good question and to give the most precise answer as we can. So this first, and on the other hand, you have technologies that are that are arriving faster and faster. So when you have a 20-year patent, do you really need a 20-year patent? Especially in the field when you have technology that change every few months, even few years sometimes. In some sectors like pharmaceutical industry or others, it's absolutely relevant. I'm not saying that we should get rid of all the patent in the world, but in some sectors, the real value for us stands in the community and the know-how of using the technology or improving the technology on a community-based approach.
We have another question? I think we just demonstrated the black hole theory. I have a question for Alberto. Have you tried to divide the conversations in two groups, those who provide care and those who consume care? Because one thing that I've been looking for in the discussions were people actually asking for solutions. It seems like most people are providing solutions, or am I wrong?
Again, speaking on behalf of most of the people in open care, I've studied quite extensively that conversation. This is by design, Rune. So basically, we posited at the beginning of the project that people are, communities are both providers and receivers of care. And that kind of takes away this nasty power dynamic of, I have the solution, you are the poor patient that needs help, etc., etc., etc. And it kind of works. I mean, I don't want to speak for the people around in this panel, but it kind of works. So there is not a big difference, and we wanted it not to be.
Okay, how about for a change that we finish conferences 3 minutes early and thank our fantastic speakers for this great conversation. We'll all join for the coffee. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all our speakers and to Fabio. Thank you so much. Okay, so now by program we have a coffee break. I just would like to spend 2 words because the coffee break and the catering today and tomorrow would be provided by a sort of in-kind service, which is not a service, but it's a school. It's the San Giusto school that belongs to the municipality of Milan, and it is a civic school that aims at helping boys and girls to enter the labor market when they have some special and extra barriers. So I would like to thank our colleague from the San Giusto school and give an applause to all them.